a frustration that my husband's introverted and I'm extroverted, which used to be a harder thing to deal with now, but now we understand each other more. So it's easier. We've been married for 15 years. And it used to really bother me that I would ask a question and there was this pause. And I'm like, what are you thinking? Like, and he's like, I don't know what I'm thinking. I need to think it first, right? I need to think it first. I need to formulate it. And then I'm kind of ready to like deliver this package deal that's, ready for a conversation.
Welcome to Personality Playbook. My name is Sadie Young.
And I'm Kayla Whittle.
And I'm so excited because today is where we start to talk about the actual preferences of type. This is, if you're looking for the meat and potatoes of type, you are here. So obviously we're going to go in order here, which, if you're a sensing type, you'll appreciate. But first we're going to talk about extroversion and introversion. And just to give you the basic overview of that, extroversion and introversion are where we focus our energy and how we gain and lose energy, what recharges us and what drains us. Kayla happens to be an ENFP, whereas I'm an INFJ. And since we are different on this, we're going to take the preference that we have. So Kayla's going to start with extroversion.
When we're talking about energy and where we gain energy, I want us to really try to focus on that question as you're considering maybe kind of where you are on either side of this preference, right? I want you to keep that in mind. Keep that at the forefront of your mind. There are all sorts of other things that we've heard about extroversion and introversion and what they mean and what you're capable of, right? If you're an extrovert or what you're capable of an introvert. And really, it's not about that at all. It really is all about this energy piece. So I'd like for you to just take a moment and kind of like wipe away what you've heard about extroversion and introversion up until this point, and then be able to really step into thinking about focusing energy. And key to remember for extroversion is that we focus our energy externally and that we gain energy from being around other people, right? And I'm highly extroverted. So I was actually telling Sadie, even before we hopped on here, that sometimes when I describe extroversion, some people are like, oh, like they look windblown after we talk about it. Because I, typically whenever I'm answering questions, I almost always answer like an extrovert because I really do process out here. I think and talk at the same time, right? Mm-hmm. So as I am trying to formulate a thought and come up with an idea and figure out or solve a problem, I really need that external space to do that, right? And I prefer to have an external space and another person to do that with so that we can really kind of like put it all out there and talk things through. I enjoy talking with others. I enjoy teaching, and I enjoy those things because they give me energy, right? Like I feel filled up when I'm around people. My joke is often that if I am home alone for a whole day, that I get weird. And what I mean by getting weird is that I'm really just drained, right? Like alone time does make me feel drained. And here's the thing, guys. I have 3 kids. I have a really busy life. So there are moments I like to run. I like to walk. There are moments where that quiet stillness, I can appreciate that. Absolutely. But if I take a step back and look at the scope of things, then I can notice that energy that I want, what I desire to feel like, occurs whenever I am walking in this extroversion and being around people. I can tell you that sometimes extroverts can seem shallow to introverts. Like, I just want to sit here and talk about myself all the time. And while that can be true about extroverts, it can also be true about introverts. Introverts can be really shallow as well. But I think what's hard is that as an extrovert, and for me as a strong extrovert, I have to fight the urge to interject. I have to fight the urge to interrupt, right? Because I'm just really excited. And as I'm thinking, it's all out here in space with me. A frustration that my husband's introverted and I'm extroverted, which used to be a harder thing to deal with now, but now we understand each other more. So it's easier. We've been married for 15 years. And it used to really bother me that I would ask a question and there was this pause. And I'm like, what are you thinking? Like, and he's like, I don't know what I'm thinking. I need to think it first, right? I need to think it first. I need to formulate it. And then I'm kind of ready to like deliver this package deal that's, ready for a conversation. So a trick that we've learned in our relationship is if I need to have a conversation with him, I'll say about like super important things, right? But if I want to chat with him about, something that's going on, with the kids or whatever, and he's going to need some time to think on it. Sometimes I text him and say, hey, sometime this week, I'd like to talk about this. Give him the subject, right? Because I don't just say, let's talk, because that's anxiety. So it's introversion or extroversion. That's the word I
the unknown.
But he really appreciates that extra process time because he needs the internal space to process that question and then be really feeling prepared for the conversation. And sometimes that takes a couple of days and sometimes it just takes a couple seconds. I just kind of need this thought on the inside to be ready to deliver outside. What it means whenever we say that extroverts give breadth to life is that we are likely to have a lot of connections and people that we know and people that I would consider friends. And a lot of people are in that category for me. So I have lots of connections. This is broad connections, whereas an introvert is more likely to have fewer connections that have more depth. And there's more parts of personality that impacts the type of relationships that we have with people. But overall, that's kind of where extroverts land. And Sadie, kick in anything that you think of here too.
I think you've kind of demonstrated this, but definitely extroverts tend to be easy to get to know. They tend to not be as, in the need of keeping
private.
Themselves. Yeah, not as, thank you. That's a good word for it. See, extroverts, They have the word. I have the words later. But yeah, definitely. I feel like when you meet an extrovert, you probably leave the first meeting having a sense that you at least know some things about them. You may know more than you want to know about them, just depending on the case.
Yeah. But sometimes people at the grocery store in line with me know a little bit about them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was my main thing that I would probably
add on to that.
Yes. On the flip side, I think it's so funny, and I hope that you will take notes from the way that we're delivering these pieces on extroversion and introversion, because I'm sitting here going, I don't want to interrupt Kayla. I want to make sure she gets her complete thought out before I say anything.
And I'm asking for interjections.
Yeah, and I'm like, but you're not done yet. So it's always funny. And I was just telling her before we started this today that she said something in our last video. And when I was looking at it later, I was like, that was an amazing thing to say. And I totally would have thought about it the next day, because that's what introverts do. We will say things now, but later we're like, I have the perfect thing when it doesn't matter anymore. It's kind of a bummer, but that's how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
As far as introverts go, I'll say one like random weird thing that's not very important. Cool. But you will notice she's okay with that.
Yes, I prefer it, actually.
You'll notice when we're talking about extroversion in a Myers-Briggs sense, it's spelled EXTRAVERSION. Whereas usually when you see the word extrovert in some other sense, it's got an O instead of the A. So just know when you see Myers-Briggs, you should be seeing that with an A. And when we're talking about other meanings of the words, you don't necessarily have to completely let go of that.
Sure.
But just know that the energy piece is what Myers-Briggs has to do with. So if you've learned enough, like there are other assessments, such as the Big Five, that use the terms introversion and extroversion, but those are different meanings of the words. So let's not confuse those. For the introverted piece, and I always say sometimes people don't buy me as an introvert because I am the chattiest introvert that I think I've ever met. Maybe I shouldn't ask her if that's true, because she's going to get on me. That will be a topic that we get into, because there's a reason for that, but that's not for today. So people who prefer introversion tend to focus on their inner world and their own thoughts and ideas. These are kids that, and I always think about kids because, when we're kids, in some ways, our type is a little bit more pure. It hasn't been corrupted by our lives yet. Introverted kids often will want to play in their room by themselves because they really are into whatever's going on in their own heads, whether that be imaginative or just thinking. And they, as Kayla mentioned, will tend to think first and then act and then think about it again. Like she said, when you ask an introvert a question, you usually are going to get a pause. And that's because instead of our thinking happening outwardly like it does with extroverts, for introverts, we really have to take a second and mull over what someone has asked us and formulate what we're going to say about that thing before we speak it. I would say the same is very true with if you're working on a project. A lot of times, if you're whether you're in school or you're in a business, extroverts will be like, let's work on this thing and talk it out. And introverts want to go away. And I don't mean that in a rude way. They want to go away. They want to shut the door on their office. They want to get the thing to about 95% completion. They're going to think it through and think it through and think it through and toss out things that don't work. And by the time an introvert brings you that project, it's pretty much almost completely where it's going to be. They're looking for tweaks, not to start the process. That runs into trouble sometimes because an extrovert will see that and be like, did you think about this? Did you think about this? Did you think about this? Because they're thinking through it right then. Yes, I did think about this. This has all happened already and we're all good.
Well, and a little shout out to doors, right?
That's true.
How important doors were. Until I started.
And not just the band.
Yeah, introverts, man, they love their doors. They do. And it's just funny. It's so funny.
And we do want you to break on through to the other side.
Yeah. We need the door, right? We need the door.
Exactly. So, yes, doors are there for a reason, and we don't mind you knocking on them. But that actually is a good point because introverts will tend to get very focused in their workspace when they've got things going on in their heads. I always notice when I talk about extroversion, I can't. My hands
are here.
Right. Yeah. You're out there and my hands are trying to zoom in on what's going on in my brain. Introverts, if their train of thought gets broken by someone intruding through the door or starting a conversation or something, it can take a while to get back into the groove of things and get that train of thought back. If you're in an office and you're an extrovert and you have that tendency and you have coworkers who are introverts, that's a good thing to remember is that it may mess the introvert up more than it messes up the extrovert to have that intrusion if they're in deep thought. Although sometimes we're in such deep thought that the intrusion is welcome because how far do you want to get in your head? Sometimes you have to get out.
Well, I think too, I was joking about doors. Here I am interjecting. Look at me. I was thinking about doors, and there were times when I worked at a school where I would go off and get some things done, and I would be alone, and I would be behind a door. But I did it because it's almost like the blinders on a horse.
Yes,
I did it because I would desperately want to talk to people as they're coming in, and I knew that I had to get work done. So for me, it wasn't. It wasn't so that I could, it was more like, hey, I need to be mindful of the fact that I am going to want to talk to people if they're around me.
Yeah.
And maybe I need to get to a spot where there aren't people there. So just a little side note.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I have to do that, but it's like, hey, Kayla, put on your blinders so that we can get some work done.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's really a coping mechanism.
Yes.
Yeah. When you meet an introvert, a lot of times people will think introverts are mysterious. And I always thought that was kind of fun. I'm like, oh, I'll be mysterious. I don't think I'm very mysterious. But, that tends to be because when you meet an introvert, they really will often need to meet you several times before they feel like they're going to open up. And so it may take you a while before you feel like you're actually getting to know an introvert because myself not included in this, most introverts are not going to be people that are going to want to have small talk in line at the grocery store. In fact, most introverts they find small talk in particular draining. So they will love to have conversations one-on-one with people. Yeah, that's a great thing to get into deep topics that they really enjoy. Mm-hmm. That can actually be energizing when it's in a one-on-one situation. But if you're expected to just chat up a room and, go, hey, how you doing? Like a work party? Where you're supposed to kind of work the room and, talk to different people and have these little conversations. Usually, if you see an introvert, it's not that we won't go to parties. Now, I will tell you, if you've got an introverted couple, my husband's an introvert too, and you'll find Kayla and I have husbands who have the same type as each other, which has also bonded us permanently.
Yeah,
for sure. And so you'll find a lot of times if you're an introverted couple, you have a code word for getting out of the party when it's time to go. And that's because all that small talk can get really draining. But if you find an introvert at a party, they'll usually try to find somebody that they already know who's at the party, and they will either go outside to a quiet place or they'll go to a quiet corner or, any emphasis on the word quiet. They'll go somewhere that they feel like they can have a more in-depth conversation. If there's not anybody there that they know, maybe this is just me. I don't think it is. There are introverts that don't like animals, but I'll usually try to make friends with the cat or the dog. And, honestly, because they don't usually talk too much, and that's awesome. You can get a little away time that way.
And I just wouldn't go if there's no one at the party that he knew. I checked her husband.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking, instead of introverts, if there's no one at the party that you're going to know at all, like, not coming.
Good job hiding that with the cold.
Yes.
I know. It's claiming to be sick. I get it. Introverts will also tend to give, we talked about breadth with extroverts. With introverts, we tend to give depth to life. There are so many things that I am not interested in at all, and that is fine.
Yeah.
But there are a few things, Myers-Briggs and the Beatles and woodworking are probably my 3 favorite things. And I will talk about those things. I got interested in those things and I just dove headfirst into it and will eat up any piece of information I can find on those 3 topics. And that's my thing. If you talk to me about astrophysics, I'm like, I guess to go. I don't know anything about that. I don't want to know anything about that.
That's how I feel about sports balls. Like all the sports balls. Just not
any of the sports that have balls. I was like, is this like a party that, like a ball that has been done for sports? Okay, sport.
I'm just not interested.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, that's not really my thing either. So, and one thing we usually talk about with extroversion, I always do both sides of the party.
Yeah.
You can tell we're both used to talking about both of these and we've split them up. Usually when extroverts go to a party, they enjoy working the room. It's so funny because I'm so used to saying this, but I still don't fully comprehend what it would be like to feel this way.
No, for me, it's like a game. It's like, how many people can I have a conversation with in this room? And will I be able, there's someone flying in my face. Will I be able to talk to every person before I leave? That's actually I think I could probably do it. Or I'll think to myself, have I spoken to them yet? I didn't speak to them. Like they're here. They might not even care. But if I find it I'm going to everybody.
And you might even be like, oh my gosh, there's a person over there that is talking to a cat and I should probably go talk to them. I don't know if they feel welcome here or not. And that person's like, don't come over here. Don't come over here.
Yes.
So
and a point I always make, when we're talking about parties, is I use Chad and I as an example a lot, my husband and I, but I always say he might say as many words as that at that party as I say, right? He's just going to say them to much fewer people.
Yeah.
So, and that's not always true for every introvert and extrovert, but it's important to say, it's not about how much you're speaking or talking, because if you get my husband going and he's talking and he's with a group, like I said, he can match me word for word count, right?
Absolutely. It's just going to be a depth versus breadth.
Versus me touching base with different people. Or I haven't met you before. This is, how we're connected and what do we have in common, right? Those are the things that I like to do. I try to be pretty self-aware. If somebody's like, I have a cat and I'm going to just focus on the cat. You know what I mean? I try. Yeah, not all extroverts are very self-aware.
That's true. Well, and that's why we're doing this whole thing. In the first place, we're trying to help you be more self-aware.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because I think, especially in a work thing, when an introvert goes to a party or something like that, they think about, we sort of plan the drain on our energy. So we're going, who do I need to speak to? Which of the people at this party are the ones that I can't get away without talking to, or it would be rude, or, for business purposes, who are the important people in this room that I need to speak to?
Yeah.
And then really, once I've done that, can we go now? Unless there's somebody that wants to talk about the Beatles, and then I'll stand there until 4 in the morning.
Karaoke at 8 p.m.
We're staying for karaoke. Okay, but that's my secret dream in life. I've never done karaoke, and I want to.
You have to.
Yeah, I should do that.
That's so.
I've been saying that for years, but one of these days I'm going to do it. So I think that probably, of course, you can imagine with this, sometimes introverts seem withdrawn and secretive. That once again, that's that mystery piece that we find to extroverts. But it really is just a matter of managing the energy and knowing that, every interaction we have is going to cost us.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to know when we're going to be able to get back to our bubble of alone time in order to recharge that battery.
Right. Or, you said that is secretive or private. I would describe it as an extrovert and knowing other extroverts that it often feels like, I don't think they like me, right? Like that is kind of that first belief that comes out because they are more private and it takes longer for them to warm up. And so an extrovert thinks, oh, well, if they're not responding to me and interacting with me, maybe they just don't like me, right? So that, I think, resonates with me a little bit more than thinking that I guess I've thought people are mysterious before, but I'm probably more likely to think maybe they don't like me.
Yeah.
Right. And now, again, this is what we do for a living.
Exactly.
It's not so much that anymore, but I would say for a lot of extroverts, they would struggle with that privacy piece, feeling like, oh, are they putting a wall up that means they don't like? Sure. Right.
And, I would also say that probably being a feeling type has to do with that as well. Like when you start to combine those pieces of type. And so that's something that that's a huge amount of what you get into when you get a whole type together, is how those pieces influence each other. So if there's anything I've learned from doing Myers-Briggs for the amount of time that I've been doing it, it's that a lot of people really love to see a visual about how different aspects of type work. I've made an animation based on drawings that were originally done by my beloved mentor, Nancy J. Barger, and I hope you enjoy them. Now, for the visual learners, what you have here is a group of people. As this group of people goes throughout their day, you'll see that you have a bunch of different activities somebody might do throughout the day. So the extrovert will do these activities, and shame on him for gambling first thing in the morning. But you'll notice that every time the extrovert has an interaction with someone else, he gains more and more energy and gets bigger and bigger from that energy. And once he's done with all of these interactions, he's going to go home and be bursting with energy and having had, hopefully, a good day. Now, the introvert, on the other hand, doesn't mind doing these activities. But you'll notice that every interaction that the introvert has drains the introvert just a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And by the end of the day, the introvert goes home exhausted and depleted and in need of a nap. When the extrovert and the introvert go home, and don't ask me what in the world made me decide to make home somebody's bald head, but that's what I did when I was making these animations. What can I tell you? The extrovert does not mind going home because everybody likes to have their, home time at some point. But the more time the extrovert spends alone in his head, it sucks out all that energy that he has gained throughout the day. And now he's exhausted and depleted and needs to go back out and interact with some people to gain all that energy back. Whereas the introvert comes home exhausted from their day and spends time in their own mind and gains all that energy back and is restored and looks like they're ready to take on the world. As you'll notice, both of these people managed to do these things, and they weren't necessarily annoyed by them, but the way they were impacted by the interactions throughout the day and their time that they spent alone is what determines whether or not you're an introvert or an extrovert. So now that we've talked about the major differences between introversion and extroversion, I want you to think about which one of these things suits you the best. Remember, we've We talked about in our previous video that you're going to lean in one direction or the other. I think a lot of you are going to look at this and be like, I absolutely am sure I'm an introvert. I'm absolutely sure I'm an extrovert. And then there will be a few of you that say, I'm both. So we're going to cover that piece.
Always people who say they're both.
Yes. And I think specifically with extroversion and introversion, there are a lot of good reasons for that.
Sure.
We have started to hear the word ambivert lately. That's become a very popular word. And I'm not saying that there's nothing to that. That's the idea that you're both an introvert and an extrovert. That is not a Myers-Briggs word. So I'm not saying that you can't claim to be that, but you're not going to be an ANFJ.
Right.
It's not a thing.
Right.
The thing that I hear about most often that confuses people on being an ambivert or an introvert or an extrovert is I'll always have people say, I'm both. And the reason I'm both is because when I am with somebody who's a really good friend and we're one-on-one, or when I'm with a really small group of people, and I always have to cap this. You know, I always say a small group of people is maybe 3 or 4 people max to an introvert. What small group of people to you?
6 or 8.
Yeah. So 6 or 8 people is like too many people for me. When we're talking introverts, you know, a group of people you know really well. An introvert will talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, especially if it's on a topic they're interested in. They may be loud. They may be the life of the party. They may not stop talking when they're in a really comfortable group.
Yeah. Chad and I call it the circle of trust.
I think there was somebody else that called that.
Yeah, we just have adopted that.
And I want to hang out with his cat too, right, Jinx?
Yeah, exactly. And the circle of trust.
Yes, when Meet the Parent and with Robert De Niro. That's the biggest one that I hear. If that description sounds like you, that is a perfectly normal way to be an introvert. That's not an extrovert. It's an introvert.
His chattiness is different.
Yeah, chattiness is different. And being around people that you aren't having to put in this new effort to get to know.
Right.
Is much less draining on a person. And you may actually leave that interaction feeling energized, especially if the topic is something that you're very passionate about. Because passion, to me, getting to express passion gives you energy. It doesn't drain you of energy.
Right.
Unless you're having to express your passion to 300 people.
Right. Which can be a whole thing.
Which can be draining to all people.
Amazing way to transition into the topic of public speaking. You knew what you were doing.
It's a segue.
So public speaking is this interesting place, right? Some people, when they're trying to hash out where they are on whether they're extroverted or introverted, this is a topic that gets thrown up a lot. And something that's interesting to me is that I am an extrovert, but I'm not very comfortable public speaking, which is funny as I'm public speaking. But I'm not here, right?
But you're talking to me.
Exactly.
And your friend, Camera.
Yeah. He's tall and skinny.
Is he?
No, but if there's like a big group of like 300 or 400 people, I would have anxiety going in front of that group and speaking. And I have done it before. It's not impossible. I wouldn't say that gives me energy, because to me, that's not spending time with people. Right. That's not interacting with people. Right. And the times that I have done public speaking, I've like required some audience interaction. Right. Because that's what works for me to be able to make it through. And then on the other end of that, there are plenty of introverts who public speak regularly or who are comfortable public speaking.
Yeah, I love public speaking. I used to be terrified of it. And no, this is not an introverted quality. Don't think that, just like not all extroverts like public speaking. Certainly, probably most introverts don't like it. But it's something that I used to be absolutely terrified of. And something that honestly, I think I started to become comfortable with public speaking because I did most of my public speaking on this topic.
Right.
And when you're on a stage with 300 people, there are usually lights and you can hardly see the 300 people. And so you're kind of just standing up there talking.
This is the part I don't like. I can't see anybody's faces.
No, if you ask me to talk about a topic that I'm not really into,
sure,
I probably wouldn't enjoy it so much. But to me, the key was being able to learn how to be a public speaker with something that I'm so passionate about that I probably could just sit there and talk to the wall about it.
Right. Something that, you don't feel like necessarily insecure about your level of knowledge and understanding with, right? When you can be really confident in that. But that was just a conversation that I felt like we needed to have because it's often what gets brought up as an example of whether I'm an extrovert or an introvert. And really, I think I know more introverts that public speak regularly than I know extroverts that public speak with.
Well, and if you think about it, it seems like most, of course, comedians and performers can be of any type, but a lot of comedians, it seems, are introverts.
Yeah, absolutely. Or actors even.
Yeah.
I always find red carpet interviews fascinating.
Yeah.
Right. Because they play all these like bold characters like actors do. And then sometimes, they're interacting with somebody with some small talk on the red carpet about what they're wearing. And it's very awkward.
And you realize that person is only not awkward when somebody wrote something.
Exactly. So I think that's just a good thing to bring up. Another interesting point that Sadie loves to talk about, which I love that she loves to talk about it. That's fair about it. But it's very fitting to have as a part of this conversation is that shyness can exist in an extrovert. Shyness can exist in an introvert, but not all introverts are shy.
Absolutely.
That's very different.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's going to give me the hook on this one in a second. And because I wrote a paper about this in undergrad and it's one of my soapbox issues when we start talking about shyness and introversion.
Yeah.
But shyness has to do with anxiety. That's when speaking with other people, it, makes you feel nervous inside. Mm-hmm. And that's not what introversion is. Yes, I have known people who are extroverts who are shy, which is very difficult because you need to interact with other people to have energy, but it makes you nervous to do so. And nervousness gives you a certain sort of energy, but it drains you really fast.
Right.
Because you're having to put that energy out in a strange sort of way. That can be definitely a difficult thing for extroverts to experience. A lot of introverts experience shyness, but I just want you to remove that from the equation of whether, or at least recognize it. Think about does this interaction with new people make me nervous, or is it just kind of like small talk? Oh, yeah, I can't wait to do the small talk. And, hopefully that anxiety issue will help you separate those things. Well, sure.
Awesome. Thank you. We're being succinct. I almost said succinct.
But if anybody wants me to talk more about this, it could be a full.
No, definitely. I'm just letting you do more on that. I think it's really, really interesting. One thing to bring up, I think, is that I am an extrovert, obviously, but I'm an only child. And sometimes extroverts who are only children have grown very accustomed to alone time. And have sometimes that they're good being alone, right? I described earlier that I get weird when I'm alone. So I kind of wanted to circle back to that and say that there are extroverts who don't feel weird when they're alone. They don't necessarily, they just feel neutral about being alone. They're not really getting energy from being alone, but they're also not being drained or feeling off by having alone time. And you would think as an only child that I would have grown more accustomed to alone time and be okay with it. But I had two extroverted parents. Sure. Both of my parents are extroverted. When you say play in your room, that wasn't a thing. I went, what? I went when it was time to go to bed. I'd run down and dragging all my toys in the living room, where the people were, I just wanted to be around other people, whichever I was playing. That's interesting to me. If I'll go to people's house, I'm like, oh, where are the kids? Oh, they're up in their room. I'm like, oh, why? Are they sick? Yeah. They're they're sick of people. They're okay. No, but it is an interesting thing. I can remember a specific story. I think I was, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7. And mom had to work and I don't remember it. For some reason, I was staying with my aunt that day. And my mom told me, this was later on down the road, that my aunt had said, Kayla followed me around all day and talked to me. And mom was like, yeah. She did. And my aunt was like, no, it was all day. And mom's like, yeah, she said that. So anyway, it's just this highlight on, how extroverted I am. But my aunt was like, is this what you do all the time? Kayla just follows you, right? talks to you. And yeah, so I had to have some therapy in college to become a little more self-aware of that. But
Oh, wow.
anyway, yeah. So no, there was no like I did not play in my room, and I didn't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, mom and dad weren't like, "Get down here." Sure, it was like I'm just going to drag everything down here and play where the people are.
Wow. Yeah. I wanted to do art in my room. That's mostly what I was interested in doing.
Oh, it's great. INFJ.
I would, well, and I would come in the kitchen to bake things.
Okay.
Yeah, but that was where the oven was and the mixer and stuff. So that was pretty important. You know, what you mentioned actually makes me think too about the pandemic.
Okay.
So, and hopefully we never go through that again, but I don't want to assume. Don't tempt the fate high atop the thing, as they say on the West Wing. I think about, all right, so I'm not going to get into this, but I have a chronic illness and spent about 6 years mostly in the bed. And, that's been kind of my recent history here. And it's funny, I think a lot about being an introvert and being sick. And, I can't imagine what it would be like for an extrovert to go through that kind of being sick where you really can't get up. I mean, when sitting in a chair is too exhausting for you and you really have to lay down. And so I had already been going through that for a couple of years when the pandemic hit. And it was funny because my husband and I were already both working. Well, I wasn't really working at that time because I was in the bed. But my husband and I were both here all the time because he already worked from home. And so when the pandemic hit, I was like, I've been practicing for this already for quite a long time.
Yeah, bringing up.
And so, it's really funny because I can probably go, and this is not every introvert. I know my sister's an introvert. She could not do this in a bazillion years because she likes to go places.
Right.
But I really can stay in the house for about 6 weeks before I even notice that I need to go something.
That you haven't been out of.
Yeah, I'm so fine with it. I have my dogs here. I have my husband here, and I can talk to other people on text messages, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I will tell you that 6 years is too long to be by yourself.
For anyone, introvert, extrovert.
That's just too long. That's not human, really. I'm sort of reintegrating into society now, I think. It's when I'm around people, I'm like, I used to know how to talk. I think I've gotten stupid. What has happened? Sometimes I even talk to you and I'm like, I used to know how to do this.
Yeah, what's the back and forth? What do we do now? Now what do we say?
You said words. Do I say words? But yeah, I think that's something to note too, is that there is such a thing as too much alone time, even for introverts. And it's definitely before the 6-year mark.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, and something that you just said, I don't know if I've ever thought of this until you were just talking about it. I think I have like a running timer of how long I've been at home all the time.
Oh, really?
Like you said, it was like 6 weeks before you noticed that you hadn't left the house yet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's been 27 hours. And it's gone anywhere. What's
27 hours? That's child's play. I haven't even stopped binge watching whatever I'm watching at that point.
Right. No, it's just an interesting thing, though. Why don't you talk a little bit about, I mentioned that I'm an extrovert raised by extroverts.
Oh, yeah.
Just a little bit about kind of the difference in like home life and how that can impact the way that we express specifically introversion and extroversion.
I am an introvert who is raised by introverts. Kayla and I are really funny that way because both of us, so Kayla's an EP and both of her parents are EPs, right?
Yes.
And I am an IJ and both of my parents are IJs. But you and I are both NFs and our parents are STs and SFs.
Yeah.
And if I remembered that correctly from like 10 years ago.
Yeah, you got it.
Definitely, I would say that, it was really affirming for me in some ways to grow up with introverted parents. When people tell me now, like, you can just come over and, just come in the garage door. And I'm like, no,
I will never.
That's not, I don't do that. That's not what I do. I'm never going to be comfortable doing that in my entire life. So, yeah. So for me personally, even though I'm an introvert, I was the extrovert in my house because I was, I was the most expressive, wanted people to have good relationships. Not that other people didn't want people to have good relationships, but
you cared about the tension and how people felt.
Yes. And so I took on that role in my household, even though that is not,
Sure.
in any other household. Like if I had grown up with your parents, I probably would have stayed in my room all the time.
Right. Because
No offense to her parents at all. They're lovely people too. But I would have been like, I got to get out of this. It would have been too much for me. So, yeah, that's something that I've talked to a lot of people about in counseling. In particular, a lot of times extroverted parents will, because we didn't really talk about this, a lot of times extroverted parents in particular will, when they're raising a kid, will be like, okay, you need to go make friends, make friends, make friends, make friends. You got to have more friends. And to an introvert, a lot of times introverts will have a best friend or they'll have a couple of close friends. And the introvert's like, what? I got him. I'm fine. I don't need anybody else. And that looks kind of scary to extroverted parents. On the flip side, for introverted parents, it might be really overwhelming to have an extroverted kid that has all kinds of kids over to the house all the time. And you're like, that's a lot of people in our home, right? And, there's a reason, like when I was growing up, my parents had a recliner and a rocking chair in their bedroom. And if we had people over, that's where they stayed. No kidding. They actually, on purpose, when they were building their house, had the bedroom made larger so that they could put chairs in there so that they would have a place to go if there were people in the living.
Right. Yeah.
So,
no, we all hung out, all of us together.
And I had friends that I would go to their house and I'm like, why are your parents in the living room? What?
What? Yeah, no, that was a really interesting thing when Chad and I got married. He is an introvert raised by introverts, and a lot of quietness and introversion in his extended family in comparison to a lot of boisterous extroversion in my family. You go to one particular side of my family and people all brought their dogs. I don't know why. You just always brought our dog to my grandma's house, that part. And then all of you are like yelling over each other, like aggressive, definitely interrupting people. But lots of big, boisterous personalities. And the first few times, like Chad's just, and everybody's like, oh, Chad's weird. And I'm like, no, and he's not weird. We're just a lot. Like, real, a whole lot. Because the other side of that is that Chad grew up right with these more introverted, more private, more quiet, reserved family members, but then also the influence of deaf culture, which is obviously much quieter. Right?
Not so much point in the noise.
Exactly. So for me over there, that also felt like, a culture shock for me too. And just kind of like learning that we had grown up so differently just from family influences and how that impacted kind of who we are and how we talk and interact and deal with people.
Yeah.
And all of that. But yeah, it was just one of those things I hadn't really thought about, the chaos that was my family. Like, I love it all, but yeah, I mean, we're sitting there eating and I'm like yelling at my grandma in the kitchen. I'm like, how'd you make this? Did you not have this?
Well, and that reminds me too, I usually mention that, it's funny because if you see two extroverts who are talking over each other, like they're both talking at the same time, an introvert looks at that and goes, oh my gosh, that's so rude. They're not even listening to each other and they're interrupting each other constantly. And I always try to explain, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, but when you see that, that's actually two extroverts thinking. So they need to talk it out in order for the thoughts to, process like they're supposed to. And so they're not actually interrupting each other. They're just both thinking at the same time.
Yeah. Our think tank is simultaneously happening on the out.
If you see a group of silent introverts,
they're thinking and they'll tell you later, maybe
if they come to the decision that that's the appropriate thing to do.
Right. I had a team of people, and there were a couple of extroverts on the team that I used to, like a leadership team that I used to work on a lot. And we had an introvert in that group, really one of the most brilliant minds I've ever been around, ever. She taught our AP Calculus course. If you're listening, Jen, shout out to you. She taught our AP Calculus course and she went to law school. She's a deaf interpreter. She used to choreograph. She repped for softball and volleyball.
So she's one of those really pathetic, sad people that doesn't
do it. She can do it. She's a dream thing. But in that space, she would see all of us doing that, right? Like that extroversion, kind of like interrupt, talk over, whatever. And she's like, I desire so much to value what you guys are saying, but I'm going to put it on the whiteboard. And that was really like her role, was like, how can I organize all of these ideas? How can I structure and scaffold this meeting so that it's not just an idea machine that's just going, going, going and never producing anything. And for her, like, it's really cool once you really understand typing, you can really grab hold of understanding and valuing these different types. And there are different parts of her letters that are impacting her desire to do that for us. But what's, I think, so cool when we're talking about this is that we begin to value that in other people or just respect it, right?
Sure.
So when we leave a party and I want to talk about all of the things I already talked about at the party because time needs to be filled in on all. You got Florida, so got married and is pregnant and they're going to do this and then right. And I was looking at him, he was like glazed.
So Chad needs a nap.
And Chad, so the other cool thing is like I can give him what he needs too. And he can give me what I need when we can understand each other better. And that's really the key component of what I love about diving into all of this.
Yeah.
Is that we can really value others for like unique perspectives and what everybody brings to the table.
And understand what it is in you that people are really responding to or that they're having a tough time with.
Yeah.
So just knowing, this is why I am the way I am is really helpful with that. And I'll mention too, one thing that we didn't say on this, I always like to talk about what percentage of the population each prototype is.
Oh, yeah.
When it comes to extroversion and introversion, the split is pretty much 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you will find, and this is another topic that I get very excited about. So I'm going to...
but out of storage, Renee, too.
So when you start talking about multiculturalism and type, so you'll find that the ideal type in the United States, I don't know who the they is that came up with this, but
yeah,
supposedly,
acceptable.
Yes, the prized type in the United States is for extroversion. If you were to go to England, it would be the opposite of that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's also going to be a big impact on it. I always say I would be so cool in England except I wouldn't be because I'm still too chatty. But in my mind, I would be so cool in England. And here it's like, so you're one of those introverted people. But even though it may seem like 80% of the talking is coming from 50%, that is the extrovert. It actually is 50-50 in the population. So if you're thinking I'm one or the other and, that's weird, nope, neither one of these is weird. They're even.
Yeah, they're really even. Yeah, they're really even.
Did you need to tell us your story?
I have one story that I feel like it's just a great story.
Okay.
To describe introversion and extroversion. And it is when Chad and I got married. It was on our wedding day.
I love this story.
So we got married on a Saturday and we had no money. I was still in college. He's working in ministry, right? And so we decided to wait a couple of days and rest before we left for a honeymoon. And we live in the Atlanta area and we decided to drive to Savannah. So for those of you that aren't from around here, that's 4.5 hours, something like that. We had just come off of a wedding weekend. We're still pretty tired. It's I think that Monday we were leaving to drive down. And we pack up the car and we're headed down. And I'm just talking, it's a road trip, filling the air. We're talking about wedding. I'm just going. Y'all, that whole day, all the way down there. Then I wake up the next morning and I'm talking. I'm like, and then we could go down to River Street and we could do this. And I'd really like to do this dinner cruise, but I think the reservation for that is at 4. Did you want to do that? Or did you, literally from the time we got in the car until we're a day in, right?
Yeah.
And I see Chad's face and it's just glazed over. It's like, so I noticed it and I just stopped, I think in the middle of a sentence. And I said, I haven't stopped talking since we got married. And he looks at me and he was like,
it's still funny.
And it's like, you know what? I'm going to go down to the pool. And I did. I met somebody down there and talked to them for a while.
I'm like, you knew people. No, you didn't know.
No, I didn't know anybody. I just went down there. There was I think wine and cheese down there, in the little lobby area, talk to people. And I was like, you just take a shower, watch ESPN for a little while. I'll come back. And that was like the best gift I've given.
Wedding, I'm going away.
Which, if you tell somebody else that, like on their honeymoon, you know, that there was that, but
No, that was excellent.
self-awareness matters, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and, just to slightly piggyback on that, I'll say this comes up a lot in meetings, what you just talked about.
Right.
Extroverts always want to look at introverts and go, why haven't you said anything? We want to hear what you have to say. The introvert has been waiting for a space. They're willing to put in their opinion, but they're looking for silence and a gap first.
Mm-hmm.
But extroverts see the gap as something that needs to be filled, and somebody going to put something in there. That is what you were just talking about is a perfect thing to let people know. Sometimes if you want to hear the opinions of others, you have to leave a gap. And sometimes as introverts, which we have a tough time with, but it's no excuse. Sometimes even if you feel like you need to, as an adult, raise your hand and be like, hello, I have something to say. That's okay. And the extroverts will be like, the introvert wants to tell us something. Everybody pause.
And actually in counseling training, learning to be okay with silence was the hardest skill that I had to learn.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I find even that's a whole other topic. But yeah, I find even as an introvert, I struggled with that when I had clients that just sat there and I was like, it's not therapy. If you're not saying anything, I can't fix you. But
allowing I think what our professors would say, like allowing the room to breathe was a huge, I liked the way that they phrased that.
Yeah.
It was like, we need to just allow space, and that it doesn't, like me being uncomfortable with silence doesn't mean that I need to speak or take action.
Sure.
It means I need to be okay and learn how to manage silence.
Yes.
Right.
Sometimes the best work comes from the lack of comfort.
Absolutely.
In the room with the silence. Well, I have had so much fun talking about extroversion and introversion today. I hope that everyone who's watching has enjoyed this as well. And I know that this is what happens when you watch YouTube channel /podcast with a couple of intuitive types. We rabbit trail
a lot, but you enjoy it.
If you need any clarification on anything we talked about, or if you're still sitting there going, you know what, I'm both, or I'm not either one of these things, or I don't know which one I am, please ask us any question you have in the comments. We will be more than happy to answer for you. And I think both of us really want everybody who's watching to be able to figure out what their type is.
Yes.
And for it to mean something to you, and for it to actually help you with your interactions in life and just with yourself. If you're having any struggles with that, it's unlikely that you will ask us something we haven't heard before. I was thinking the other day about how in our last video, you were talking about being amphibious. And I've had someone describe introversion as being a monk.
A monk?
Yes. And I was like, I think that requires some religious aspect. But sure. So, if you think maybe you're an amphibious monk,
yes,
and you want to clarify that, then drop it in the comments.
We can help you.
In the meantime, I appreciate you watching us, and I hope you will hit the like button, give us a comment, subscribe to our channel if you'd like to do so. Enjoy our subscribe ninjas, because it's my favorite thing in the entire world, bouncing across the screen. We did have fun. We did that because when I became a Myers-Briggs master practitioner, my husband, Ben, started calling me a Myers-Briggs ninja. And so when he told me there were ninjas for the like button, I was like, we must have ninjas. It had to be ninjas. We should put little types on their chest. Thank you for spending this time with us. And when we come back for our next video, we'll be talking about sensing and intuition.
That's right.
And thank you guys so much. And I hope you have a great day.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. You will go off on this, but I think we could touch on lightly, briefly, for a moment, shyness and introversion.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I wrote a paper on that, right?
Precisely.
Oh.
Yeah. Yes.
Of course, I know you wrote a paper on it, Sadie. That's so. Yeah.